Okay, so in the last video, we stopped where I showed you this issue that we have. So if I run this query, you can see it's a bit slow. And if you go back to our code, you can see we have 245 requests. This is called the N+1 query problem. It exists in a lot of contexts. And in this one, we started by fetching the root user, and then for each level we went and fetched another thing, and for each level we sent a new HTTP request to that API that we have, the JSONPlaceholder API. So this is not good, and imagine we have millions of users and you have so many requests going on. If you keep doing this, this will overwhelm the servers and it could lead to issues. So it's a good idea to always remove this, or at least try to mitigate it as much as you can. There are some packages and some frameworks that detect these kind of things, but here we don't have it. But it's a common issue and there are some techniques to solve it. And this technique is called data loader. I'm not sure if there are different techniques, but I know that this one exists. It's called data loader. It's really cool, and I highly recommend watching Lee's videos. He's one of the co-authors of GraphQL. He has this video where he goes through the data loader source code, which is really interesting, and also another one for GraphQL. So he's one of the co-authors. Highly recommend watching the videos. I'll put them in the description. So this data loader thing is a way to fix the N+1 query problem by batching all of these requests. So if you think about it, all of these users we are fetching and posts, the API or the DB behind the scenes should give us a way to just send a one request to get all of these things. So instead of fetching each user individually, we can send one HTTP request and tell the API, hey, give me these users with these IDs and call it a day, instead of just keep bombarding the API with requests. And that's true. So I will show you an introduction to GraphQL data loaders. So why? Because we want to prevent the N+1 query problem. It also gives us a really good caching layer, which you can customize, and you can give it any underlying data layer, data caching layer. So it could be Redis, could be anything. You can customize it. And you can also disable it completely, so it's up to you. Also, we can batch these requests. Just like I said, instead of sending 5 requests to fetch 5 users, you only send 1, and this is possible by using this package. And here is an example of what we currently have. So we have this users type, and this is our query type, which is the root entry point to our GraphQL server. So we are fetching here the user of ID 1, then getting the next user. The next user exists in the fields here, and it points to the same type. So I also can do next user again. And just like we said, just like I showed you in the previous code, what we do for each resolver, we just get the ID, like for the next one, user resolvers, we just get the ID from the parent, increase it by 1, and then send an HTTP request. So this query will end up with us sending 3 HTTP requests to the JSONPlaceholder API. We can do better by sending only 1 request and combining all of the IDs in the URL query params, and this will give us an array of users, and we just give it back to the client. So instead of sending 3, we send 1, and this is an example of N+1 query problem, because we started with this user of an ID 1. Then the more we want to fetch things, we do more queries. So we always start by 1, and then we add n queries to it. So that's it. For SQL, this will look like this. We have the same type, we have the same query, and this will end up with 3 SQL queries, and we can do this, which is way much faster. We can query where ID exists in this array of numbers. So this is the idea behind data loaders. It's that you batch all of these requests into one, then you do it faster, basically. So instead of 245, like our example, this should be a couple of requests, and that's it. So the data loader package expects a function called the batching function, and this function will be, the data loader package will give it an array of keys. So in our example, if we are fetching the user of ID 1, then we're fetching the user of ID 2, then 3. These will be the array of keys, so 1, 2, 3. And this expects you to return an array of values, which are the 3 users in our example, or array of error instances. We will talk about errors in the future, but now just bear with me. There are some things you need to keep in mind when you use these batching functions. The array of values must be the same length as the array of keys. So if we ended up if the package ends up giving us an array of length 5, we should retain a values of the length 5 also. And if I could not resolve one of the IDs, I just retain null. So we could potentially retain an array filled with null values. Just remember this. And another thing, if you want to build your own batching logic, if you want to keep in mind, hey, this idea resolved, that this batching function gave me an array of resolved values, where do I pass this object to, which kind of resolver now it goes? And this is done by the fact that each index in the array of values must correspond to the same index in the array of keys. So in this example, if the array of keys was 1, 2, 3, when you retain the array of values, the first element should be the user for the ID of 1. The second element should be the user for this one, which was invoked after this, and you keep going basically. So this is how you know the order is by basically looping over the keys and then mapping them to the values. That's the idea here. Here's a small example of how that would look like. Let's start by looking at the instantiation of the new data loader. So it's just you create a new instance by using the new keyword. You pass a batching or a callback function, let's say. Then I'm loading these 4 users, for example, ID 3, ID 1, ID 4, ID 2. All of these will end up in the array of keys. And then what we go fetch the result from the DP by, for example, this kind of array instead of this one, instead of these ones. And then we loop over the keys, and then we get the results from this results map, and we basically map it like this. And if we couldn't find anything, we return an error or null. So that's the idea here. That's how we keep the order. That's how the data loader package will know that the first element in this array will correspond to the first invoke of the batch function. The second element will correspond to the second invoke, and so on. That's why we always loop over the keys and map them in these batching functions. You will see this pattern over and over when you use this package. And here is a small example of what these 4 invocations could end up returning here from this line. Okay. So as you can see, the ID of 4 does not exist, so we return null. We don't just remove it. So that's the idea. Now let's go and add that to our code. I'm gonna copy the installation part. So I'm gonna install it. I will create a loader folder in our source folder. I'm gonna go there and create an index with TypeScript. I will import a bunch of things, which is the data loader class, and then these types that we already have. These are TypeScript types like this, which correspond to the GraphQL types. And then I want to create 2 counters to count how many times we call these functions. So first thing, I'm going to create a variable or a data loader called user loader. And this accepts a callback function, which is the batched function. That's what they call it. I will make it an asynchronous function. And this will accept an array, or in the documentation, they always call it IDs. I will just call it IDs. You have to always give it read only in TypeScript to make the types happy. Other than that, it will complain. You see? So I will just give it an IDs, read only, sorry. Now to do this, I'm gonna use Axios. And maybe I can copy it actually from here. So this is our previous loader. I can just copy this part. And remember in our example, if I show you, this is one way to fetch multiple users from the JSONPlaceholder API. So I'm gonna do that. The way I will do it is I will loop over the IDs. And convert them to that shape. So ID equal ID, and then I'm gonna just join with an and at the end, instead of passing /ID, I will just add a question mark and add all of these things there, which will give us the same exact thing as this example. And now remember in what I showed you on the last thing, that we we have a map of the results, and then we loop over the keys and we return that. So we need to create this map for each loader. So let's do that. So this will be, imagine if we passed a 1, let's start with 5, then 1, then 9, then 20. So these are the user IDs we are gonna fetch. So we have, so the user in the GraphQL query requested 4 users with these IDs, so we will fetch them in one request. Then to tell the data loader, hey, this user object corresponds to this one, and that one corresponds to 9, and so on. We have to, because all of them inside this array, we have to create some sort of a way to map this array of keys, which are these ones, the IDs, into the corresponding objects. So at the end, we will end up doing IDs.map, and we say, like this custom map we will create, I will call it users map, and I'll just get the ID. So this is the idea now. And this, you will see this pattern over and over. So let's create this map. And I will just loop over the data and reduce it. And one way to give this types, that you come here and say, hey, this is a user array. And now we have auto completion. And another nice thing is you can also do the same thing here. So if you want to type these array of anything, you can say, hey, this will be a number. And the other thing, I'm gonna retain a user, and behind the scenes, this will be like used to convey that this is an array of users. So if I do now string, this should contain. See, so it's nice. And now also the same thing here. So I'm gonna tell it, I'm gonna reduce this array to a record, which is an object, and the keys will be the number, and the value will be a user. So let's do that. Okay, so the first is the whole value that keeps being returned every time, and this is the current, this will be a user. And I'm gonna return, instead of doing, we can do this. So I'm gonna return, I'm gonna destruct, I'm gonna spread everything that I already have. And now I'm gonna group everything by the user ID. So I'll just call it user, not current. I think that's more readable maybe. So user.id would be equal to user. And that should be it. So let's go back. Let's actually log these now. I'm gonna say console.log counter, and before that I'm just gonna say counter plus plus. And this second counter will be used for the posts loader. So I'm gonna show you the basic, like a simple way to use these loaders. Then I'm gonna show you a much more organized way, which is adding them into the GraphQL context. But for now, let's just use them here. Let's go to loaders and let's import them. So let's go scroll down. This user loader, we can just say return user loader.load and give it ID. And we have also here another user loader. We can just say load this. And we have this next user field, and the way we'll do it, we just do this. And remember that we added +1 because we are getting the next user. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. So that's pretty cool. Let's go rerun the same query we had. Oh, we need to run the 7. I mean, it's not 240 now, 45, it's at least 11, but we have 2 counters. We're gonna change this to user loader counter. Let's also log the IDs, why not, right? So we are calling it 4 times instead of maybe many. I don't know exactly how many times we called it in the past, but maybe we can give this much more organized structure, or at least we can give much more nicer examples. So I will start with ID of 1. I'll get the name. I'm gonna remove these things. So this will be called first user. Oops. This will be called second. Oh my god. Second user. This will be called third user. So if I run all of these, you can see I'm gonna restart this because they have a default caching layer. I don't want that to mess up with the example. So if I run this, you can see we only called the API once and with these IDs. And if I run this again, you'll see the log will not happen because this thing was already cached. One way to, I believe, is just you go here and say, yeah, cache is false. Now this will never be cached. I can run it again, which is nice. And this actually maybe do next user. Here is an interesting thing where maybe this also will shine. I'm gonna, so I have the cache layer. I'm gonna rerun this. If you think about it, I'm gonna add the ID for each one of them to never be called again, which is nice. So this user of ID 2, we are fetching it twice. You see here and here. And if I restart everything from the beginning, you'll see that the function that previously was invoked twice, and we sent two HTTP requests to fetch this user and this user, even though it's the same user, now will not happen. We will fetch it only once. So that's another thing behind these data loaders, which is really nice. So if inside your query you are prefetching the same thing again, the data loader will really understand that from the IDs and then just give you the cached promise, which will resolve with this value here. So that's really interesting. Yeah, so even if I go here and do next user, ID name, let's go and run it again. It's only gonna fetch only one request and fetch these IDs and won't duplicate them because it understands that, hey, this one here, this object here is the same one we already fetched here, so we don't need to fetch it again. So it's really cool. Yeah, so I hope this shows you how cool this thing is. So let's now do maybe a bit more complicated example, which is loading the posts. And it's pretty similar to this one. So I'm gonna just start copy and pasting maybe just to speed things up. So we have this post loader, and this will be equal to a new data loader. I will add some typing later, because if you think about it now, this post, like, look at the way we are resolving the posts. We get the ID of the user. This is a mistake from the previous code, from the previous video. This is a user, because you see, this is the parent field, which is a user. This is a user. That's why we are extracting the ID from the user and then passing it here, and it works. I'm sorry about this. So this is a user, because you can see it here also, and we get the ID and then we pass it here. So the idea now is to reduplicate this. So we can do and this and this, and we keep adding these until we get all of the IDs, all of the posts for a list of array of users. So this loader will accept an array of users IDs, and then because each user has many posts, so that, let's say for example we pass these user IDs 6, 3, and 7. The returned value will be, because every user has many posts, will be an array of arrays. The first element would correspond to all of the posts for the user of an ID 6. So this will be maybe post 1 and post 2. For user ID 3, maybe that user has only one post, and for user ID 7, maybe this will have an array of 100 posts. So this is the returned value. It's an array of the same length, but it's an array of arrays. I hope that's clear. So that's why the way I'm gonna type this is by number, which is here, sorry. So number, and then this will be post, but I'm gonna deviate an array, because look at this here. This will already, data loader will already use this type to convey that the return value is an array of users, okay? And if you give it an array of posts, this means it will return an array of arrays, and each array is an array of posts. It's a bit too much, I know, but you have to push through it, I guess. So I'm gonna define this asynchronous batch function, and this will be, I will call it user IDs, read only. You have to do this. It's an array of numbers. Then let's return an empty object just to make it leave us alone. Empty array, sorry. Okay. Now we'll do the same thing with mapping over them, but this will look that this will have the user ID as a key, or in the key for each query param, and I'm joining them with an AND. Then I'm gonna just fetch the data with like this. Oops. Like this. And then I need to map it, but in a similar way. So I'm gonna create a map variable called posts map. So I'm gonna loop over the data. So the starting value is an empty object, and this will give us a record, and the keys are numbers, and the values are an array of posts. So let's go and return. I'm gonna spread the previous value, which is, I'm gonna call it accumulator. I did a mistake. This should be also made accumulator named, sorry. And this will be post, and will be of type post. So I'm spread that, and then I'm gonna group everything by the user IDs, because these are user IDs. So I'm gonna loop over them, then map through using the posts map. So the keys should be the users IDs. The way you do it is just you do this and then user ID, and this is an array of posts. And the way you'll do it is just say the current post I'm looping over belongs to this user ID. So you can't just put it here, but because we have to spread also the previous ones we got for this user, because this array could contains 5 posts for the specific user. So you have to also spread the previous, which you get it from the accumulator. So current post dot user ID. So you need to spread that. This could be undefined the first time, so you do this. So this will give us the posts map. Now we do user IDs dot map. We know that this is the ID, then most map, and give it to me like this. Now if you come here and let's import this. So where is the post loader? That's it. We just come here and say return dot load, and we give it ID. And now we can remove this variable, and we can, let's create another one. I will call it posts loader counter, and let's log it with this. Let's add also the user IDs. So let's go see the logs and monitor everything. So this is the same thing that we had, and let's add now some posts. I'm gonna add posts ID title. This will give us only this one, but let's rewrite again with this one here maybe. So posts, we'll say ID and title, and also I'm gonna get the next user and gets the posts for that next user, and also get the ID and title, and maybe do the same thing. Not here, sorry. Get the next user again and get the posts and ID title. Get the next user also, get posts ID title. So run this. Maybe this because a lot of things are cached. Just remove that and run it again. So that's it. So instead of 245 times, maybe I should run the same example, but we are running everything way less than that. And the posts counter, we are only running it 4 times, which is really cool. Maybe I will rerun the same query, the same big query again. I don't have it, but I ran it already again. I already ran it in the past, and I know it performs really well. Sorry about that, but this is just to show you the idea here that you can batch these things. You see these post loaders, these 2 users got batched in the same time. And the way this batching works is by using this function, so process.nextTick. There is this thing called a tick in the event loop in Node.js. This is where some callback functions and methods will be executed. I don't know that much about it, but this is what determines which thing schedules batches. You can customize this. You can create your own scheduler and pass it to the package. But for a lot of cases, this is enough. Doing this is enough. But I've seen some custom implementations of these kind of data loaders and schedulers. It could become really complex, but you should really understand the basics, especially this part of creating this map and then always looping over the IDs. And you should always return an array with the same length and so on. So yeah, I hope this was useful, and don't forget to watch these 2 videos. And that's it. Bye.